In this video from Justia Webinars, Jim Robinson, president of the JurisPro Expert Witness Directory, shares valuable insights on evaluating cases, uncovering relevant experts, conducting thorough research, and obtaining crucial deposition transcripts. If you want to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure you're subscribed to our channel.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very first Justia webinar of 2023. We're so glad to have you all with us. We hope you're having a great new year so far since it has just kicked off and that everything is exciting and going well in your practice. We're also very excited to have you all here with us for our very first CLE accredited Justia webinar. This is a new benefit exclusively for our Justia Connect Pro members, and we're very glad to be able to offer it to you today. So a couple of housekeeping things about that CLE is that this presentation is only currently accredited in the state of California. So if you're a California lawyer, getting that credit is already set up for you. Do what you normally do. If you are a non-California attorney looking for CLE credit, please complete the attendance verification, and we'll talk more about that later. And get your certificate and follow whatever your state's self-submission process is to see if you're eligible to get credit for this. Also, as I mentioned, the CLE credit is available only for Justia Connect Pro members. So while all of you are here today with us, and we welcome all of you to be here, those people who are looking for CLE credit will need to go ahead and upgrade to Justia Connect Pro to be eligible for that credit. You can do that at connect.justia.com/pro and get that out of the way and ready so that you can verify you are here with us today. Remember, you need to stay for the duration of the presentation, as well as get the attendance verification code, which will be given later on in the presentation. And I'll explain how you verify your attendance at the end of the webinar. So with all of those housekeeping things out of the way and that excitement that we're ready to bring here to you, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Nina, and she's going to help us kick off today's presentation.
Thank you, Marina, for welcoming all of us here today. My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for this webinar. I wanted to start out by giving a bit of background on our speaker, Jim Robinson. Jim is an attorney and founder of JurisPro Incorporated, a professional marketing company that features the qualifications of expert witnesses to legal professionals, insurance carriers, and the media. JurisPro also maintains a free online national directory for expert witnesses in over 10,000 areas of expertise, jurispro.com. Jim was also co-founder of expertwitnessprofiler.com, which produces comprehensive background reports on expert witnesses. Jim will be joining us for a live Q&A portion at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions that come up during the webinar, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button in the bottom of the screen. The webinar itself will be a little bit over an hour, and the Q&A portion will commence afterward. Without further ado, here is Jim to discuss finding and researching an expert witness.
Hello, my name is Jim Robinson. Welcome to Finding and Researching Expert Witnesses. We're going to be going over some of the ways that you can research expert witnesses, find them for both your case and for your opponent's case. So just a little background, I am the founder and president of the JurisPro Expert Witness Directory. We're coming up just about to celebrate our 25th year. All we do is work with expert witnesses. And certainly my experience with experts has led me, I'm the author of one of the chapters on the ABA's book, Litigators on Experts. Wrote the chapter on finding and researching experts for the CEB California Expert Witness Guide, and contributing author to the Expert Witness Marketing Book. So with my work with JurisPro and researching expert witnesses, I co-founded a company called Expert Witness Profiler. I've since sold off my portion of it, so I don't have an interest in it, but I can tell you it's an excellent source for getting reports on your expert witness or that of your opponents. It compiles a lot of the information that we are going to go over today. And certainly the majority of the information, and in fact, much more of the comes from a white paper that we wrote a few years ago. We call it the Expert Witness White Paper, Finding and Researching Experts and Their Testimony. It is available on JurisPro at the link jurispro.com/expert witness white paper. We're going to be moving through this material pretty quickly. There's a lot of ground to cover, as you might expect, with dealing with expert witnesses. I certainly recommend that you go through the comprehensive layout in the white paper. And as I will say at the end, certainly if you have any questions about it, both after this presentation is over or indeed afterwards, certainly happy to help as best I can. And for a very comprehensive look at finding not only expert witnesses, but learning about individuals, about companies, about where you can get information, most of it free. I recommend highly Carol Levitt and Mark Rosh's book, The Cyber Sleuth's Guide to the Internet, which is available at their website, netforlawyers.com. So with that, we will launch into finding and researching expert witnesses. Certainly, as I'm sure most of you know, that an expert witness is a witness who is qualified by his knowledge, skill, or her knowledge, skill, experience, training, education, and they may testify in the form of an opinion. The expert has to be qualified, and one of the keys part of this is that they have to be able to assist the trier of fact. And so you start thinking about, well, who would be that person? Well, certainly you start thinking about doctors and engineers and other professionals, but indeed expert witnesses can come from any field. This was a case that happened rather recently, back in December, where the rapper, who I'm sure we're all very, very familiar with, Young Thug, whoever that is, that he has a RICO trial, and he has designated multiple hip hop experts. And again, I would imagine that a lot of people on the jury wouldn't know that much about hip hop music. So he has indeed found hip hop experts that are going to testify in his RICO case. And certainly expert witness testimony is important. It cuts across so many different areas of everyday life and things that affect people in political areas. For example, Carrie Lake, in her bid to overturn her election loss in Arizona to Katie Hobbs, that she challenged the reporting that was done and how it was done by the Maricopa election officials, that she hired a cybersecurity expert by the name of Clay Perrick, that he testified about the printer malfunctions that caused some of the ballots to be printed on different sizes, that this expert said that because they were printed on different sizes, that gave an unfair advantage to Katie Hobbs. There was another claim that the ballots were allegedly added by a contractor who handles mail. Wasn't a whole lot of evidence that those were swayed in any way. And in fact, in cross-examination, Carrie Lake's expert, this Clay Perrick, became angry in court when he was pressed to admit that the ballots would eventually be counted even if they were printed on the wrong size. And it was noted that this expert had previously spoken at election denial events, including those sponsored by Mike Lindell. Another very big case that just came out recently, in fact, just to conclude this on Carrie Lake, that because the claims were so unfounded by Carrie Lake, the judge very recently, within the past month, came down with an order that ordered that Carrie Lake pay the governor-elect Katie Hobbs $33,040.50 plus 7.5% interest for payments for the other side's expert witnesses to have to defend these claims. So moving on to what is a big case that just got resolved here in the past few weeks, that there was a case involving Ericsson and Apple. And for those of you who do not know who Ericsson is, Ericsson's a very big company. They're a Swedish global technology company. They have some 60,000 registered patents. They spend about $4 billion with a B in research and development each year. And they have the standard essential patents used in 4G and 5G mobile phones. So as the case went, Apple sued Ericsson, claiming Ericsson violated international law that requires standard essential patents, such as those used in smartphones, And Apple claimed that those terms were not fair, they weren't reasonable, and they were discriminatory. In other words, Apple claimed that Ericsson was charging too much for their patent license and hurt Apple in trying to be able to use these 5G technologies for their phones. Apple applied pressure to Ericsson by withholding payments, and Ericsson was returning the favor by seeking bans on the import and sale of phones in multiple countries. And Ericsson basically succeeded. That Colombia refused to sell Apple iPhones. So this big suit went on. Apple asked the court for Ericsson to indemnify for its costs incurred once the Colombian judge ruled that the 4G and 5G phones couldn't be sold in that country. And in an interesting twist about this case, Ericsson wanted to sue in Marshall, Texas, that they had what they thought was a advantage by suing in the US in Texas. And so Apple, what did Apple do? Well, they went ahead and they closed 2 of their retail stores in that district. And the reason being, among others, but certainly what was speculated, was that that would hurt Apple's ability, it would hurt Ericsson's ability to have jurisdiction in that area if Apple was not doing sales in that area. Well, so the case went on, and just very recently, they had expert witness testimony in that case. And it was discovered that the expert witness that Apple had hired coined the phrase feminazi to disparage committed feminists. So this took place on December 7th. This person testified for Apple, and 2 days later, Apple settled with Ericsson. Now, I'm not going to say that this was a direct result because of this information that was discovered about this expert witness, but I'm sure it didn't help. So the disclosure of the settlement was not made public, but in a note to investors, the financial analysis at Raymond James estimated that the company's new deal will result in licensing payments by Apple to Ericsson of roughly $100 million per quarter. And that is up from $55 million that Apple was paying Ericsson in the past. So expert witness testimony certainly does matter, and perhaps none more so than in this recent case that happened involving Amber McLaughlin. So Amber McLaughlin, now a woman, in 2003 was a man, and he was accused and ultimately found guilty of raping and killing his girlfriend and then dumping her body in the Mississippi River in St. Louis. He was arrested, and during his time in jail, he transitioned to a woman. One of the key issues that came up in the trial, as might be expected, was the mental state of Amber, then Scott McLaughlin. The trial lawyer had promised in the penalty phase that they would be presenting expert witness testimony of a psychiatrist that would talk about this person's mental state. According to our lawyers, this compelling mental health evidence would have refused the sole remaining aggregating factor in the case, that McLaughlin had acted with depravity of mind when she, then he, killed his her girlfriend. Problem was, they decided not to call this expert witness. And the reason is that during the sentencing, it was revealed that the psychiatrist named Keith Caruso was in fact somebody who had lied about some lab data in a previous case. And the public defender in the case was so concerned about how that psychiatrist would be received by the jury that they failed to put that expert witness on the stand. So essentially, during the penalty phase of this trial, when it was going to be decided whether this person was going to live or die, the expert witness testimony was seminal, and it was not given. In fact, it's referred to by many as the Dr. Caruso fiasco. And it was all because this person had lied about some lab work in another case and therefore decided not to do it. And as a note about this case, the jury was deadlocked on whether or not this person should be put to death, this first openly transgender person in the US. They were deadlocked, and the judge decided that that person should be put to death. And the governor of Missouri refused to intervene, and Amber McLaughlin was put to death on January 3rd. So certainly expert witness testimony does matter. And as those of you who are a part of this presentation have unlikely been a part of, you can see how an expert witness can make or break a case. Well, so when we're deciding about who we're going to hire as an expert witness, it really pays to know something about the subject matter. You have to know what questions to ask the potential expert. You do the same type of basic investigation onto the topic so that you know which questions to ask. And so to get started on that, so we can learn about the subject matter, we're going to go to the library. And you think, wow, the library at this stage? Well, having a library card is a good thing. You can apply for library cards online now, and that will give you access to some tremendous resources. For those of you across the area not sure about what different states and what jurisdictions, what areas have access to the public library websites, you can go to lib-web.org for a list of library services that you can access online. So one of the reasons why we want to go to public libraries to go through their website to learn something about the subject matter is their incredible access to something called Associations Unlimited. So for example, here in Los Angeles, we can go to our local public library, the Los Angeles Public Library, and again, having our library card, we have access to these databases, including one called Associations Unlimited. Associations Unlimited is a fantastic resource. Again, these are all free. It just takes your time to be able to get your library card to access it. And generally, you do have to be living in that area. You need to have an address in Los Angeles, say, for example, to get a Los Angeles Public Library card. But once you do, you have access to these different resources, including Associations Unlimited. So if we go to the LA Public Library website, we run a search for Associations Unlimited, we find this group. And I'll tell you, or this association or group of associations. And I'll tell you a little bit about this Associations Unlimited. They have something like 456,000 different associations that they have collected. You have information about each organization, its membership, a little bit about the person. Likely they'll have the name of the director. They'll have contact information about that type of person or type of the person who is leading up this association. So for example, we'll take what will be one of our many hypotheticals for a case. And this was a case that something similar happened to this, where they have car shows up at different places. They have one up in Pebble Beach. And we could imagine a scenario where a hang glider, who is they're all over the place there as well, that they crashed into one of these vintage car shows. And the question is, what is the damage repair? What would it take to repair different types of cars, and especially vintage cars? Well, if we go to this Associations Unlimited, we run a search for Cadillac. Let's see what type of searches are available for Cadillac. And we find out that there is indeed an association, not just for Cadillac, but for 1958 Cadillac Owners Association. So if you had a case where you needed to know the valuation of a 1958 Cadillac, I can't think of a better place to turn than to this type of association. And as we said, that they provide a number of information, or a lot of information, including the contact information, their email address, their URL, some just basic things about that organization. And so, for example, this association for the 1958 Cadillacs, that we can find information about who they are and what type of information they could provide us. If we had a medical issue, then a good place to turn to try and find information about that subject matter would be the National Library of Medicine. This is a great place to find materials in all areas of biomedicine and healthcare, including biomedical aspects of technology, the humanities, and all kinds of different things that have to do with just about every type of medicine and practice that you could find. So, for example, of course, all the different COVID cases have come up. In fact, with JurisPro, it was when the pandemic had first started, we added a category for coronavirus and COVID-19, and we could not believe it became one of the most popular areas of search for us. And certainly, if you wanted people who had specific knowledge regarding a particular issue that was involved with COVID-19, then starting your research through something like the National Library of Medicine would be a good place to start. So for our case here, we go here, we run a search for COVID, and we find a lot of information, including this article that came up, COVID-19's impact on older workers, employment, income, and Medicare spending. And along with that, that you can get the name of the persons who wrote the articles, and perhaps they could be used as expert witnesses as well. So not only are you getting information about the subject matter and maybe specifically about the issue that you have, but these are also potential experts. Of course, just because they're qualified doesn't mean they actually will testify, which we'll get to in just a couple of minutes. Also, one of the great places to get information, and indeed with all of our clients with JurisPro, we recommend that they write something that demonstrates their expertise, but does it in a way that is helpful for the people who would ultimately be hiring them. What I say to them is, if you help me, I will like you. And I can recall practicing as an attorney pre-internet days that I would collect these types of articles, because if I had a business valuation case or an area where I wasn't readily knowledgeable about, I had to know which questions to ask. And so fortunately, a number of experts have done this. These by no means are complete checklists for what exactly an attorney should be asking a potential expert witness, but they certainly give you a guideline, and they'll open you up to things that you may not have thought about. So for example, here's an article that somebody had written, how to select a business valuation expert, a guide. And it has questions like, how many valuations have you performed? How many previous engagements have been for divorce purposes? What valuation credentials do you hold? What is your prior testifying experience? So general questions, but also you can get into very specific ones. And again, that I recommend to all of our experts to do these types of things. For example, here's an older article, but I thought this was one of the best ones. And it was about chiropractic expert witnesses. And in this article, it answered these questions. How are doctors of chiropractic licensed? How many years did you attend chiropractic college? What subjects did you study? Do you, like MDs, take national board exams, state board exams? Are you considered primary healthcare providers? Are you licensed in all 50 states? So these are questions that you may or may not have thought of. And certainly if you have a slip and fall accident and there's a question about chiropractic treatment, that to know whether or not they need to be certified. Did they have to pass any types of tests? Are they required to do continuing education? If you don't know to ask those questions, you may hire somebody who either is not properly qualified or certainly could be subject to cross-examination. And as always, on the other side, if you know that that person should have been licensed, and just because they have a license in one state doesn't mean they're licensed in another. If you know that, that is grounds to trip up that expert witness. So here is an example of a job site that has written advice to an expert, or written advice for experts on how to become an expert witness. And just in this couple of paragraphs, they raise some great questions that we as attorneys would want to be able to use to evaluate whether or not we want this expert. So for example, in this article, they talk about, is the school the expert attended recognized as a school that offers one or two programs in graphology? Are there certifications from the American Handwriting Analysis Foundation? Did the expert receive a designation as a certified graphologist? What is required to pass the two-part test that was required to become a certified graphologist? Are they a member of the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners? What's required to be a member? Do they have to pass analysis of samples? And I always thought, as far as handwriting experts go, that they ought to be given one real signature and then one that may or may not be, and say, is this real or not? I thought that should be the only test. But of course, if we know to ask these questions of our potential expert, and again, or to do cross-examination of the other expert, then these would be helpful. Just again, in these couple of paragraphs, some more questions. Have their methodologies of reasoning merited certification from the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners? Are they members of the American Society of Question Document Examiners? Did they do an apprenticeship? Did they present at least one technical paper to become a member? And if so, we certainly want to get our hands on that paper. Just in these couple of paragraphs here, and it's a much longer article, but it gives you an example, not something to be relied on verbatim, but gives you an idea of the types of questions that we should be asking if we're going to be hiring a handwriting expert. So at this point now, we've learned about the subject matter. We may have found experts who would be qualified as expert witnesses, but are they available? And so for that, we turn to a number of different sources that could find people who in fact want to work with attorneys. We go straight to search engines to go look, and certainly I'm an advocate of search engines, spoken on behalf of Google at different presentations, but there are some limitations, certainly. They tend to be over-inclusive. You get a lot of information that you have to sift through. And to that end, I'm going to talk about how to narrow your search functions in just a minute. You got to get through some of the paid searches that are on top on the ads. Information may not be accurate. I know that's tough to believe, that everything on the internet's not true. Like there's silly things like the Pacific Northwest tree octopus, probably not real. But there's other things that, do hit a little closer to home. Like an example that we give in the white paper involved the Malaysian airline that went down. And initially it was reported that it was brought down by terrorists. Someone in the Russian government altered the page regarding that to say that the plane had been shot down by Ukrainian soldiers. So yeah, I know I'm giving new information here, that not everything on the internet or available through search engines is accurate. And certainly search engines like Google, they can't access everything on the internet. It's just impossible to do so. A lot of it is behind firewalls. It's real-time documents. It's fresh content like blogs, social media sites that they just can't get through. Some pages are written in non-HTML language that makes it tougher to find. And certainly pages that are located in databases, and they may eventually be found on the search results, but you may have to sift through thousands of results to get there. And indeed, this is a bit of a dated slide, but it's one worth noting that Eric Schmidt of Google said every 2 days we create as much information as we did up to the year 2003. So again, this slide is dated somewhat. But the point remains is that if you're just relying on Google, you're missing a lot of information. So certainly big fan of Google, use it every day as most of us do, or any of the search engines. But we just have to be aware that a lot of this information we're missing if we just rely on the search engines. So to that end, let's go and let's dive into a couple of databases that you may not have thought about that could be right spot on point for our case. So one, if we had a product liability case, one of the places that it was worthwhile to go check is a company called ThomasNet. Now, ThomasNet is a database that has about 500,000 companies. It has industrial buying guides. It's a free online directory. You can go there. You can search by product. You can search by company. You get some information about the company and certainly contact information. So for us, for an example, we have a case where a submersible pump had malfunction. the pipe fitting on this submersible pump had gone bad. We'd rented the pump, or the client in our case had done that. So we want to try and find some information, somebody who could help us out for this case involving pumps. So we go to ThomasNet. Again, it's a free search. We run a search for pump rental, and we find a number of different companies and about 325 different suppliers, including this company called Xylem. Well, we do a little research on them from this page, and we find out that they claim that they are one of the world's largest rental companies for the submersible pumps. That they say that their services include marine, oil and gas, mining, construction, and different types of pumps, including pipe fittings. So indeed, in our case, where this pipe fitting had failed on the submersible pump, that this would be a very good company for us to contact to get some more information. So, and for this ThomasNet that we find once we go and click on through their page, we have access to their website, we have a phone number, and indeed we have a person that we could contact, this Chris Sahlstrom, who's the manager of aftermarket services, that he'd be a good person potentially as an expert witness, and certainly I would think somebody who would know a lot about these types of pumps. So going now to specifically people that we know are going to available to testify, that one of the places that is a resource for attorneys to use is through expert witness referral services. Probably the best known of those is TASA. TASA, the benefits of using a company like TASA, they have a large database of experts. The way that they work is they go and they contract with different expert witnesses. They do all the billing for the expert. They help find and match the expert to your case. The downside is that you're paying for their service. So if the expert charges $400 an hour, they'll tack another amount on top of it. So it may be $500 or more an hour per hour using that expert. Now, certainly their fees vary for the different companies for that, and there are some very specific ones. One of the other companies that is a good company that we work with a lot is a company called Forensis Group, another expert witness referral company. They've been in business for about 30 years. They've, as they say on their website, they've been hired in over 30,000 cases. So certainly they are a very good resource as well. And specifically, if you had a case that involved needing a medical expert, American Medical Forensic Specialist, AMFS, is another company. And indeed, there's many of the medical referral, expert witness referral companies, as there are a lot of different expert witness referral companies in all areas. So turning to another source for finding available expert witnesses is certainly expert witness directories. I'll highlight a couple of those, and there's some that are done through different bar associations or through other companies. For example, the San Francisco Bar Association, they maintain an expert witness directory. They have about 600 experts and about 300 different categories. You can get the information about the expert, their contact, a little bit about their specialties, if they provided it, their degrees and licenses. Other companies like ALM, which owns and publishes 33 different national, regional, and international magazines and newspapers, they also maintain a expert witness directory that you can go and search, and you can get some information and be able to contact expert witnesses. A company that just works with expert witnesses, a company called Seek. Seek is an excellent resource beyond having their expert witness directory. They have a lot of materials about what to look for with an expert witness's report. They have a lot of research. They're geared towards the expert witness, but certainly for the litigator, it's a great place. They have a lot of very good books on what to look for when you're looking at an expert witness report, or how to deal with the depositions for experts. So along with their expert witness directory, they also have a lot of resources that may be helpful for your case. Our company, JurisPro, as we said, we were founded back in 1999. All we do is work with expert witnesses. So we provide information about the expert. Our real goal with putting together our directory was to provide as much information about the expert as the expert was willing to provide. And so to that end, certainly you can see the expert, you can hear the expert, you can get an idea of how they sound. You may want somebody who speaks with a particular cadence for your case. I always thought whenever I was working with an expert witness on a case, I wanted somebody who could speak all different types of languages. And by languages, I meant this, that there's some people that they react to kinesthesiology, it's touch. And so I wanted an expert that would say things like, does that feel right? In other cases, some people react to things that they see, they're visual. And so you want an expert that will say things like, can you see what I'm talking about? Others, of course, are based on audio, that what they hear, the words, the sounds mean something to them. So you want an expert who will say things like, does that sound right? Or does this ring a bell? And of course, you get the perfect expert that speaks all of them, that talks about the way that something feels, and can you see what I'm saying? Does this sound right? You get an expert who has these different types of skills, you're able to reach a lot of people. So certainly we wanted to include with our experts, not for every one of them, that it's up to them, but that you can hear what the expert sounded like. You can get their full CV. You can get their references, which we'll talk about why beyond just calling the experts references just to see whether or not they're a good expert or not, how that could pay off in other ways. And some of the experts as well have provided their background, how many times they've testified, types of cases that they testified in. That they provided basically a list of questions that you would ask at the outset, certainly should ask when hiring the expert, and of course, when you're cross-examining the expert, to know about these things. This is information these experts have provided themselves, so could be a wealth of information there as well. And the publications for the expert, many of our experts have provided articles on different subject matters as well. We have expert witnesses in over 10,000 areas of expertise. This is a free resource. So if you ever need to find an expert witness, please go to JurisPro or contact me. Be happy to help. Even if we don't have that expert, we'll work to try and find that. Okay, so so far we've learned a little bit about the subject matter, but there's a question. We know that these experts are available, but now the question is, do we want them? And of course, on the other side, what dirt can we dig up on the opposing expert? And as we go into this is one of my, getting into some of my favorite slides here on this, and it has to do with fabrications. I know this may come as a surprise to many of us, but not everybody tells the truth all the time. So as far as fabrications go, a company called Averant, they looked at 2.6 million job applications, and Averant's a company that specializes in job screening and selection. They revealed that 44% lied about their work experience, 20% fabricated credentials or licenses, and 41% lied about their education. That's out of 2.6 million job applicants. So the question is, do experts make fabrications? Does it happen with expert witnesses? Well, let's see. Police lied about their credentials. NASCAR accused medical expert witness of false credentials. Expert witness accused of lying. Expert who lied about credentials sentenced. This is one of my favorites. Major League Baseball medical advisor falsifies resume. I mean, you think if you're Major League Baseball, you're probably going to get somebody who's not lying about their credentials, but they did. And then recently, Sidney Powell's, I want to go back to old Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell's military intelligence expert witness was actually an Army mechanic who never worked in military intelligence. So yes, they do tell falsehoods. And of course, the courts aren't just letting these things slip by. There was a case where new trial and monetary sanctions against defendant were warranted because its counsel knew or should have known that its expert witness had falsified their credentials. The amount of the sanction was over $580,000. So certainly we want to research this expert, both when we're hiring that person and certainly if we're doing cross-examination. So in researching the expert, of course, as most of us would do, is we'll go to the expert's website. Here's an example of an aquatics expert, a man by the name of Tom Griffith, a little bit older of a website, but he lists on his website that he's one of the top 25 people in the world of aquatics. Well, I should have put the explanation point after that. By the way, I just noted he has that he wants to emphasize that fact, wrote it in red up on top. My thought was, who were the other 24? And he must be number 25 because he would have done that. So maybe we want one of the top 24. And how in the world do you determine that? It just seems like that's ground for cross-examination on that topic. And indeed, you got to think about when you're hiring an expert witness that this slide could be on a poster board in front of the jury that this expert would have to answer for. And to that end, you want to make sure that the expert's witness website is something that you would want to be shown in your case. This next slide is an example of an actual expert witness website, taking away all the identifying information on here, because this was one I just couldn't bear to put the person's name up. But this was a dental expert. This website was in motion so that the rhinos were running across the page. The monkey in the lower right-hand corner or in the bottom of the screen there was jumping up and down, and the skull exploded. And again, this was somebody who offered their services as a dental expert witness. And you just got to make sure that when you're going to hire an expert or you're that you're opposing one, that you see what have they posted on their website. Here's an example about, there was two bike experts that were going back and forth in a case, and they decided that they were going to go ahead and post information about their case on their respective websites. So this was one expert trash talking the other, and the first expert was talking about his counterpart, and he said, so the opposing expert has said that the bike industry is fault. The expert opined again that the only entity at fault in this accident was the bike industry. The fact that the cyclist was on a double yellow line going 41 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour speed zone, dressed in dark clothing, without a headlight at 1:30 in the morning, had no bearing on the causal factors of the accident. So you think, well, that's pretty damning stuff. Well, what did that opposing expert who got trash talked do? He went ahead and he posted the college transcript of his expert that was trash talking him. And I don't know how well it could be seen. I'll try and highlight some of the grades, but I will submit to you that if the LA Rams had this many Ds, that they would have been defending their Super Bowl championship this year. Thank you. Thank you very much. So certainly we want to go and we want to check the expert's website. And indeed, we want to see if they have put up things in the past that they may have taken down. So one of those places to check is something called the Wayback Machine, archive.org. Now, what the Wayback Machine does is it's cataloged some 10 billion, I think is the number, archive pages of websites. Not just the home page, but pages deep within the site as well. Not every single page of every single website has been cataloged, but it's certainly worth a search. If an expert has had a license that they promoted on one page back some time ago, but now they've removed it, certainly that might be telling. So just as an example to show what it looks like, we're at the Wayback Machine here. We're going to ask it to take me back to google.com because we're big fans of Google, and we see all the various pages that they have cataloged here, including their first one back in November 11th, 1998. So we're curious to see what Google looked like back in November of 1998, and here it is. It was a screenshot that was taken on that date. Here's your original Google. And one of the fun things on that, it says, Google is a research in progress and there are only a few of us, so expect some downtime and malfunctions. And my thought is, isn't that true of all of us? But certainly we are fans of Google. And let's say that we have a case that we want to do some research on. It's a groundwater case where benzene had been found in some water. Benzene is a component of products derived from coal and petroleum. It's found in gasoline and fuels. If you have exposure to this in water, it could lead to drowsiness, dizziness, unconsciousness, and even death. So if we had a case that we had to do some research on, that we needed an expert witness, we've gone through, we know which questions to ask, and we get a recommendation for an expert by the name of Nachman Bratbauer. Nachman may have seen earlier, he's listed with JurisPro, somebody who we know, and someone who you may know as well, that he was involved in the Aaron Brockovich groundwater case. It was a case against Pacific Gas and Electric involving groundwater contamination in Hinckley, California. And just in case you didn't know that he was involved with that this is one of his older versions of his website, but he has a picture with him and Aaron Brockovich where Aaron is quoted saying, "I wish the world had more Nachman Bratbauers." Wrong apostrophe there, but that's okay. So we've got some information about Nachman. Seems like a good person for our benzene case that we want to do some research on that person. Of course, we first turn to Google. And as you may or may not know, Google's got a lot of products and services. Now, not every one of these on the list is ones that they're still working on. Some of them were beta, but you get the idea that Google's got a lot of stuff. And how do we sift through it? And indeed, if we run a search for Nachman Bratbauer on Google, we find that there's 7,200 and more results here. So the question is, are we really going to sift through 7,200 results to try and find information about Nachman Bratbauer, either as potentially hiring him or to oppose him in this benzene case? So one way to do that, to narrow it, is certainly just by running a search and narrowing it down to news to see what information is about him that's been in the news. So some of these are older, but still are potentially information that could be used either to hire or to oppose him. That there's a Forbes article called Dr. Mold. He's quoted in a case, "How does workers' comp disability ratings work?" Another, "Lead exposure threatens the liver." Now, eventually you may have found these results by sifting through all the different results, those 7,200 results. But certainly by narrowing it down, we can go straight to those items. Even something like running a search on images for Nachman Bratbauer, that we see certainly his face there. We've narrowed it down to images here, but there's also there's a paper down there at the bottom of this that we may click on, that we may or may not have found by sifting through this, just by going to that. And again, these don't take a long time to do. Video, same thing, that if we run a search for Nachman, we narrow it down to videos here. We see some videos here. Drinking tap water over a lifetime could increase. Well, let's find out. One of the things that I certainly recommend, and when I'm doing presentations about Google, is to use the advanced search function. Again, these information would come up eventually in the search results, but if you narrow it down to specific things, for example, PDF, Word documents, PowerPoint presentations, you may come across some gems. And so for our example, we came across a PowerPoint presentation mentioning Nachman Bratbauer called Science in the Courts, where Nachman Bratbauer is quoted about the benzene levels, what's acceptable and what's not. So if this was an issue in your case, to know at one point that Nachman Bratbauer said 10 parts per billion is very, very, very minuscule, then if he says something different in trial, you have information that you could impeach that expert witness. Okay. And I also, as I said before, that Google misses a lot. It suggested that Google only taps into 1% that's actually out there. So if we're going to try and find something about the expert's professional background, certainly, again, we can start with Google in there, but you may or may not find information about that person. And it's worth, of course, checking in to see what is and is not available about the person's background. Here's an example of a case that was lost for not checking certifications. In the spring of 2007, a federal judge in New Orleans threw out a victory by Merck in one of the Vioxx cases filed against it, because Merck's primary expert witness has stated at trial that he was both board certified in internal medicine and cardiovascular disease, when in fact, both those certifications had lapsed. They lost the case on this issue. This is how easy it would have been to check it out. That one could have gone to the American Board of Internal Medicine, which is a nonprofit, self-appointed, physician-evaluated organization, and found out that this particular expert witness had a 3-year gap in their cardiovascular disease certification and a 6-year gap for their internal medicine certification. It would have been that simple. The American Board of Internal Medicine is a free site. You just got to know to go look at it. Another example, certainly where worth checking out, was intellectual property case that you go and check out, that you can get patent, trademark, copyright information. An example of that was the Bush versus Gore case, where it was found out that the testimony, the effect of the testimony was written in the strained faces of the Bush legal team. So it certainly pays to go and try and find what information's out there about them. For their educational background, I like to cite this particular case, which was a great one. Alabama expert witness was charged with perjury. Despite the fact that the expert had sworn under oath that a CVE was truthful, it was determined that he did not, in fact, have a Texas medical license, a medical degree from Harvard, or a doctorate from MIT. So as I tell my expert witnesses, you're going to lie, you might as well go big. And if we want to find out whether or not the person is going to lie or have they lied, you can check out their education through the Student Clearinghouse, otherwise known as the National Student Clearinghouse. They have arrangements with different universities to be able to check on the educational history of the potential expert, to see if they actually graduated from Yale. If they say they did, it's a free search to go and search that. It costs about $6 to $20, depending on the institution. And they have, I don't know if they have every single college and university out there, but they have a lot of them. And so you can contact them. It does take some time to get the verification back, but certainly worth checking out. Okay, so we've learned something about the subject matter. We found experts who qualify. We determined they're available. We've looked through their background. Now we want to know about their testimonial history. How have they testified in the past? Well, certainly starting with jury verdicts is a good place to start. A company called Zarins, JVRA, they maintain about 120,000, so they say, verdicts and settlements. When you go there, it redirects to findverdicts.com. There are different ways that you can order these jury verdicts. It's a free search, but it does cost anywhere from about $30 to about $200, depending on what you are searching for. They have different types of plans that you can download articles and subscribe to them, that you can get it, but it's a pretty comprehensive place to find jury verdicts. Another one is verdictsearch.com. This is supported by ALM through law.com. They have about 180,000 verdicts that they claim. You can get day passes for a certain amount. And of course, all of these jury verdicts, indeed, a lot of this information has been compiled into the different paid database like Westlaw and Lexis. So if you're a member there, depending on the plan, you can have access to that information as well. For depositions, there's no single place to get depositions, no one depository. DRI works with the defense group, DRI.org. If you're a member there, you can access transcripts for them. They're member donated. On the plaintiff side, Tralsmith, they claim that they have about 600,000 transcripts. Again, same type of way that these are all donated by members, and you can get them if you are a member, but you have to be a member. And certainly, as we said earlier about when we have references to the expert who's worked on cases, an alternative is to contact that referencing attorney. For example, Nachman Bratbauer had on JurisPro a couple of references, is to call up those attorneys and ask for deposition transcripts. As most attorneys do, they will keep expert witness transcripts, and you might be able to at least get on loan some deposition transcripts there. If we were looking for court documents, certainly going to a site like Justia. If we have an expert like Catherine Ford Corrigan that we've been recommended to, that if we go to Justia, we run a search for her name, that we find out that there are different documents about her regarding her testimonial experience, including a motion to exclude her. Certainly something we'd want to see what grounds that expert was going to be potentially excluded from. You get information from PACER, public access to court electronic documents. This is for the service of the federal judiciary. There's no fee to register. There's a small cost to download documents, but you can get documents there, including, as an example here, this motion to exclude this expert. Testimonial history, briefs, and motions. As we said, a lot of this information is compiled in the different paid services like Lexis. You can get on Lexis, you can get motions to exclude experts, you can get agency opinions, such as this one from the Florida Public Service Commission, which could reveal information, how this person has testified, whether it's in a case or in front of an agency, you'd have an idea. And they also have depositions as well. Certainly, in terms of expert witness testimony, we want to find out if there's ever been a challenge through Daubert to find whether or not this expert has been excluded. One of the most comprehensive places to do that is through the Daubert Tracker. What Daubert Tracker does, it researches and collects reported and unreported case information and documents relating to expert witness challenges. They track over 165 different gatekeeping authorities dating back to 1993. So if you go to Daubert Tracker, you can run a search. They have different programs there, depending. You can do a one-time search, you can be a member, and so forth. That if you run a search, in our case, for our dear friend now, Nachman Bratbauer, you can see that there's been a number of cases where he's been challenged as an expert witness. If you, again, want to view and download, if you are paying for that service, that you can get the case information, what the issues were, who the parties were, and of course you can use this information to contact the attorney who's involved with it, or to use it just on its own, the fact that this person has been excluded potentially on cases or why they were allowed to testify. Personal information. Certainly we want to have some idea about who this expert is beyond just their testimonial things that could potentially be embarrassing or show bias. We want to do, and there's different places that we can try and find this. One place, certainly, if they have any criminal history, we'd want to know that. Not every county has this, but a lot of them do. This was an actual expert witness that we did some research on and found out that they had been involved in felony theft. Again, not every county has this, but it's worth a search to see, of course, if they have any criminal history. Their political persuasion, you may want an expert that has a certain bent towards, I don't know, med reform. Then you can go and see how they voted through the Federal Elections Commission. So just for fun, we've run a search for George Clooney, not that he's a potential expert witness, but just why not? We find out all of his various contributions, that he's made about $15,000 at this time the search was run. There's a link to the receipt where we can find, among other things, his mailing address. So if you wanted to drop George a line and tell him how much you liked Ticket to Paradise with Julia Roberts, there you go. And of course, it has the employer's name. He says he's self-employed and actor. You may decide after you've seen Ticket to Paradise that that's in question, but that's for another story. Certainly social media. We want to have an idea about what this expert is saying or has said on social media. it's so important to get an idea because social media is so widely used. It's written very quickly. Often it's not a lot of thought in it. And so if there's information there, we may want to know. One of the best articles on this topic was written by Robert Ambrogi. He's a writer and speaker about legal technology, executive director of the Massachusetts Newspaper Association. And he wrote a great article called Expert Blogs, Loose Lips Sink Trials. And one of the concerns that's raised in this was about consistency, that if somebody has said something at one point and has said something another way, that we want to know it. So for example, if we had a case where a kid had drowned in a public pool and there was a question about how the lifeguard responded, we remember we had that top 25 aquatics expert witness, Tom Griffith. We think, well, maybe we'll go back to him. Well, we find out that Tom Griffith had written a blog, which among other things said, I have a very cynical saying, lifeguarding is for losers. So if we were hiring Tom Griffith to represent the lifeguard there, we may not want that expert on our case. Some other quick examples about social media posts that this was a post on being an expert witness where the person had posted, I've been asked to be an expert witness in an arbitration hearing. And ends the post by saying, anyone have any advice for being extra effective? So you get something like this and you go, wow. You could imagine the cross-examination that would take place on what the phrase extra effective means. And certainly if we're going to hire an expert witness, we want to make sure that they're professional. If they do have a LinkedIn profile, that they have something that they look sharp, they've got a nice haircut, and they don't look like this. And again, these are people who testify as expert witnesses. So, and one of the final ones that I will leave you with is this one, where this person said, I'm an expert witness in an awful case. McDonald's under fire for hires. So could you imagine that this is your expert and the person says this is an awful case? And one of the best sources of information, I think, for all people really should be The Onion. The Onion is a satire newspaper, as many of you know, but they highlighted the fact about how damaging information that's put up on social media sites can be. And they put this fake news story up that says, report every potential 2040 president already unelectable due to Facebook. And of course, the joke is really more real than not, because they give an example of something that you could imagine that they gave this, again, fake news story about this kid, Trevor Kaufman, that he's studied at Duke University, lives in Durham, looks like just a great upstanding young man, and then posts on there a picture of him who's built a bong out of an 8-foot lacrosse case. So certainly we want to find out, is there anything that's damaging, embarrassing for our expert, or certainly for the opposing expert? I'll end my presentation again as I began. My name is Jim Robinson. Thank you very much for being a part of this. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to help find an expert witness to the extent that I can turn you towards some resources, further resources to find and research your expert witness. I'm happy to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for watching our presentation. We have Jim here today. We will now move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions for Jim, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we already have a few, so we can go ahead and jump right in. The first question we have is, how much does it cost to download depositions through Trailsmith and DRI?
Good. Well, first of all, you have to be a member of both organizations or either organization to get access to their depositions. And it's really interesting. Both organizations work on kind of a barter system. Trailsmith does charge if you want to download it, but if you just want to read the deposition, it's free. Again, you have to be a member. And with Trailsmith, you have to be a member of the plaintiff's bar. They ask a few questions and so forth. They don't ask you to submit your every case that you've worked on to determine what your percentage is for plaintiff and defense, but certainly they cater to the plaintiff bar. And again, Charles Smith, the way that they built their deposition database is really on the take one, leave one type thing. They've actually give credits to people who submit those depositions. If you, again, it's free to read, but if you want to download those, and it costs about $25 to $50 to actually download to have the transcript. Again, you can read it, but you get discounts of up to $15 with Charles Smith if you do submit depositions. And certainly what they encourage is people, once you're done with your case, is just to take all your depositions and just basically dump them in there. DRI works somewhat similar. They don't post what their prices are to actually download the depositions, but again, they work on that same sort of system where if you've submitted depositions, that you can get depositions. Again, that's just for the DRI, for the defense group there. It's pretty interesting if you think about it, and a question I don't think is fully resolved is who actually has the copyright for those depositions. I'm not exactly sure how Charles Smith and DRI gets around it. There's different rules for when you can have a third-party deposition, when a third party can have access to a deposition, because of course they're not necessarily public. They're not submitted in most state courts into the public domain. And you can imagine that there could be some embarrassing things if you had a house fire and somebody's got to go through all the contents of their house and list what they are. There may be some compromising things that they wouldn't want to disclose, and certainly everybody has personal and private things that they may or may not want to have other people to know about. So you can get those depositions through DRI and Charles Smith. You do have to be a member. There's a fee for it. I think the lowest cost to be a member of Charles Smith, about $529, something along that lines. But that is really one of the best places to get transcripts on a wide range.
Great. Our next question is, what type of information does Expert Witness Profiler provide?
It's a great question. It's essentially everything that's in this presentation and everything that's in the white paper that we talked about that's available, as we said. When we started up Expert Witness Profile, and again, I do not have a stake in the company anymore, but we looked at this and we said, is it possible to make a comprehensive report? And certainly there's a lot of information. There's no way that everybody could, or somebody could get all information about it, but it is amazing. So even down to some of the things we finished the presentation with about what their social media posts are. Here's a link to their LinkedIn profile. All of their testimonial history that we know of, their educational background as part of the report that Expert Witness Profile goes and looks up their National Student Clearinghouse information and includes that in the report. So it's comprehensive. Some of these reports that we did when I was working were 300 pages or more. I mean, it's just a massive information. So virtually everything that we talked about here today is found, if it's available, it's included in the Expert Witness Profiler report.
Our last question for today is going to be, what types of experts receive the most Daubert challenges?
Good question, and probably not surprising. It's from the medical community. Charles Smith, Daubert Tracker is the best place to get that type of information. They list on their website what are the most challenged experts, and it's almost 2-to-1, if not 3-to-1, the number of medical experts. Engineering is the next, and then you get into psychology, police, and law enforcement. But the number of challenges that Daubert Tracker has just in the medical community, last I checked, it exceeded 60,000 different challenges just for medical experts. And you can imagine, kind of getting into who qualifies as an expert witness and in what types of fields. And certainly if somebody who's a neurosurgeon starts talking about behavioral science issues, you could see where those challenges would come in. That it's not necessarily that person is not qualified as a neurosurgeon, they're just not qualified to talk about behavioral movements in a car, things of that nature. So yeah, medical experts by far are the most commonly challenged expert witnesses.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, and thank you for all of your questions. It looks like we're almost out of time for today, so I'm going to hand things back over to Marina to wrap things.
Yes, thank you, Nina, and thanks, Jim, and thanks to all of you for being here. We really hope that you enjoyed the presentation and that you learned something that's very helpful to you going forward for your practice. We hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did enjoy it, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more law practice and legal marketing videos. See you in our next clip.